Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm seeing lots of people rolling in, so I'm going to give folks time to join us today. I'm actually particularly excited about this topic. This is one of our first webinars on the topic, and it's one that is near and dear to my heart. So really excited about this today. We had quite a few people register, which is always wonderful news, and hoping that you all enjoy it, and we're going to have lots of engagement with you as well. So, all right, I think we're starting to get to a sweet spot of folks joining today's event, and so I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. So, welcome everyone to today's event. It is for build and maintain a robust data practice. My name is Jonathan LaCour. I'm the CTO at Mission, and I'll introduce who Mission is a little bit more in a moment. But I'd also like to introduce my co-presenter here, and actually the person who's going to be doing most of the presenting, Dr. Ries, who is our practice leader for data analytics and machine learning.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here and talk with you guys today.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Ryan, for being here and giving us all that credibility with your with being a doctor. I don't get to have such an honor. Wonderful. Well, so everyone who's in attendance, let's do before we jump into the slides, let's quick kind of housekeeping things. So the first is that we have some handouts actually attached to the GoToWebinar kind of user interface. So if you actually go down to handouts, you can download some stuff. So we have an ebook and a data sheet, both kind of relating to the topic of machine learning, data and analytics. So please take a look at those. In addition, we're going to have lots of opportunity for Q&A. So there is a section inside of GoToWebinar, which is for questions, and you can add those questions and we will handle them when we get to it. And I did notice someone say that they're having trouble downloading the data analytics and machine learning PDF. And so I'm going to ask our wonderful mission marketing team who is on with us to maybe delete that and re-add it so you can get that downloaded. So please add your questions to the Q&A section and we will handle those at the end. Finally, speaking of getting to the end, stick around for that because we do have kind of a cool special offer to outline when we get to the last little bit right before Q&A. And with that, let's get started. So I promised that I would introduce Mission, so that's what we're going to do right now. A really quick overview of who we are. We're a leading AWS Premier Consulting and Managed Cloud Service provider. And we have this wonderful comprehensive suite of services. So you can really think of us as sort of your one-stop shop for all things AWS. And we're 100% focused on AWS. We don't really work with other cloud providers. We don't do on-prem work. We're really 100% focused on success in the AWS cloud. And the breadth of our service is really to meet you wherever you are in your cloud journey, including the architecture phase, kind of getting you ready for getting into the cloud, migration readiness assessments, road mapping, and things of that nature. Then we perform migrations, and we can do that as simple as a lift and shift or all the way through a complete guided cloud transformation where we implement a CI/CD pipeline for you, do infrastructure as code and configuration management, and really get you to a great spot. And I am definitely seeing some other folks in the Q&A and in the chat mentioning they're having trouble with the handouts. Tell you what, if we don't get it sorted out by the end of the call today, we'll make sure that we send a follow-up email that has all that information. Sorry about that. Management. So that's the next phase. Once you're in the cloud, we also provide kind of 24/7 monitoring and support for people who need it. If you don't have a large operations team or you want to kind of take that burden off of them, that is something we provide. We do kind of continuous services there around AI, ML, DevOps, and so on. And then optimization. Obviously, it's really important that you remain optimized when you're in the cloud. Otherwise, your costs can run out of control. Your performance will not be quite as you want it to be, and you could drift off of security best practices. So that is another thing that we provide at Mission. So key thing here is anywhere you are in your cloud journey, Mission is there to be your partner. So let's go to the next slide, Ryan. So what does it mean to be a premier consulting partner? So Premier Tier is the highest level of kind of partner recognition in the AWS ecosystem. And it means that AWS has actually vetted us and validated our skill set. across a variety of competencies and designations as well. And they do that by actually looking at actual customer case studies and actual performance in the work that we do for our customers. So you can see there around the competencies and designations, we are certified as a migration partner, DevOps, Microsoft workloads, SaaS, healthcare, life sciences, and then a variety of designations, including the ability to deliver well-architected reviews, immersion days, and more. So it's really, we're your one-stop shop for all things AWS. And before we dive into the slides on the detail around data analytics and machine learning, let's do a quick poll to just kind of gauge where you all are in your kind of process. So let's toss that first poll up, please. Okay, so this first question is asking kind of where you are in your journey around data analytics. So do you have a formalized data analytics strategy or roadmap? And you can tell us, no, you don't have one yet. I'm working on it and it's in progress, or yes, we do. And I'm seeing, oh, great, you're very quickly rolling in votes. I really appreciate that. We'll keep it up for another moment or two so you can all give us a quick response. And this is anonymous, by the way. We're just using this to kind of gauge the audience a little bit, make sure we hit the right notes for you. All right. And my favorite part about being the organizer, I get to see the results of the poll as they're coming in. So you all have to wait. The exit polls is what I'm looking at. Okay, let's go ahead and close the poll out and show where we are. This is actually great news. A significant portion of you either already have a formalized data and analytics strategy or roadmap, or you are in progress on developing one. And that means this is very timely for you. For those of you in the category of not having one yet, that's totally okay. That's part of what we're here to do, is to help you come up with that strategy and roadmap. Okay, let's do one more poll real quickly. And this is really to understand kind of your machine learning experience thus far. And one of our favorite benchmarks on this is really understanding, have you put machine learning models in production yet? So please do give us a response on this one as well. This is one of those things where even if you do have a strategy and a roadmap, there's a lot of work that goes into, which we're going to explore, getting your data ready for running machine learning models on. And there's a lot of misunderstandings around machine learning models as well. So I anticipate this will be a lower percentage, and that's being validated so far. Okay, let's go ahead and close out the poll. All right, so only 35% of you have actually put machine learning workloads into production, models that is. So this is actually a perfect opportunity for you to kind of learn a little bit more about that, what it looks like in practice. Okay, so Ryan, I'm gonna pitch it to you and kind of ask you, why do companies need a data practice and a strategy around their data?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Jonathan. I think there's a lot of scary numbers out there when you look and you see Gartner and others, Verge. There's a lot of companies that have been digging around, doing polls, and even our survey that showed only 35% of people have put productions or put models into production. Companies are spending a lot of money, a lot of effort, and these projects just aren't going anywhere, right? They don't have a comprehensive strategy. They have a lot of different silos, and all of the different silos are kind of fighting amongst each other. It's been really interesting over the last several years that I've been working in this space as a premier consulting partner, just seeing what's going on. I brought in a friend to work with me, and it was really interesting because, after working for several months and talking with customers, he gave me the analogy, being a consultant is like being able to see big companies' dirty laundry, right? We're able to get in there and actually see what's going on. And, the numbers here seem scary. 85% of projects fail and 90% of models never make it into production. I've seen anywhere 65 to 90, you guys just in that poll showed 65%. We walked into companies where they had 100% of their models not in production, right? They were all just sitting there. They had a team of data scientists who were just building models all day and nothing was going on, and it was just all these silos that have happened. And even myself, I've worked on several projects with big companies, and we were trying to do some simple models, and you'd have a table that was owned by your particular focus area, right? Whatever group you may be working in. And you needed data from another part of the company, right? Maybe it was In this case, we needed some shipping information, right? Just zip codes. We were trying to predict the cost of shipping, and we had certain information in our table, but we didn't have zip codes. And as you guys know, zip codes are pretty important in the shipping world. It seriously took, a bunch of filling out forms and other stuff to be able to get that zip code data. And this isn't even PII data, right? This is really just the zip code, not even talking about the street address or anything else, just the generic zip code. It delayed the project almost a month because we couldn't get the simplest data in there. So it's really important, that you look at and build a top-down strategy and have somebody that's overseeing it, that's able to remove these roadblocks, right? It has that vision of what's going on, is focused on each of the different groups, right? You have your data science group, you often will have a data engineering group, and you'll have a BI group. And so you really need to have somebody that's able to look at all three of those, understand the goals, and make sure everyone's working together, remove those roadblocks so that you really build that environment for success. That's really one of the biggest issues. And then once you have that environment for success, you make sure there's collaboration amongst all the teams, right? There's often a product owner out there as well that's in a different group, and that collaboration with that product owner is super important as well. So it's really helping define that whole strategy, removing the roadblocks, and improving that collaboration that's really going to get you where you need to go. Data practices now have a lot of pieces that are involved, and it's really, complicated. And, if you don't have that strategy in place of what you're going to do, you are going to see your projects failing and your models not get into production because there's just too many roadblocks, and people get frustrated, and, they'll leave the company. And then once, a data scientist leaves a company, that model often just sits there and nobody takes it over because the workload's too much. So it's really, really important to build that practice.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting. We hear a lot from customers who have built out a strategy, but they still manage to get into a place where it's a struggle to actually have a successful outcome. And I do think you've called out some key attributes here that are really important, but maybe we should dive a little bit more into how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look at a timeline of data modernization, the cloud revolution began somewhere around 2006, right? AWS was established, and you can talk about there are companies before that that were doing private hosting and really starting with some of the cloud, but AWS really began a lot of that journey. And then you saw, it wasn't used that much in 2006, and you started to see more people joining around 2010. And there weren't a lot of services yet at that point, right? So a lot of people were moving over, they were doing things like Hadoop on EC2, and they're still in that kind of vision, right? There's still a lot of companies who back in 2010 were just working on what's my data infrastructure going to look like. And whenever somebody builds out an on-prem data warehouse, they're looking 10 to 15 years in the future. So a lot of those companies in 2010, as the cloud revolution began, they might have been looking at, do I take that risk or do I not take that risk? And a lot of them opted not to take that risk. So they're still in their data centers now because they're 10 years in. They still might have an additional 5 years, and they're looking at now, what's my strategy going to be? How am I going to move into the cloud? So there's definitely a lot of things going on in the space. The cloud's been around for a long time, but so many people in the data space are still really locked in on-prem simply because of the investment that they've made. So it's really important, now over the next couple of years where those companies have to make that decision again, right? Am I going to continue to stay on-prem, or am I going to move into the cloud and let somebody else manage my infrastructure and then just focus on the actual data that I have?
Standing, it's good to get that history. And obviously we've come a long way since kind of 2006, mid 2010s, and now we're in 2021. So maybe talk to us a little bit about how we can think about data modernization today.
Right, absolutely. So when we talk to customers, we like to talk about the 6 V's of big data, right? These are really important of how to think about your data, what you need to do. Over the last several years, I'm sure you guys have seen it, IoT devices are coming out, right? People are putting in more and more smart cameras or smart sensors. warehouses are getting all these sensors, right? You're starting to talk about smart warehouses, and you're really seeing data increasing, more than 50% per year. And you're just seeing all these new data sources all the time, right? You can get plugins and APIs, and Amazon's opened up, along with Google, data store so that you can just get data from anywhere, right? You just got so much data out there that you really have to look at, what am I trying to do? What problem am I trying to solve? And so, those 6 V's really become, volume. How much data do I have? How many different sources am I pulling in? What am I going to do with all this, all this data, right? Do I want it to just sit on S3? Am I going to build out data marts? Am I going to, I would need to build a data governance strategy that moves data off of S3 into Glacier so that I can store my historic data at a much cheaper rate. Another big piece is variety. You've got structured data, semi-structured data, unstructured data. So you have all this data coming in, and it all needs to go to different places, right? Your structured data will often go into a data mart or a data warehouse where you're still able to query that in SQL, right? Your semi-structured data can be out there. Your unstructured audio files, video files that you might be running machine learning algorithms. Each of these pieces, you have to think, how am I going to do ETL on it, right? How am I going to transform it? How do I want to save the raw data? How do I want to save any of the transform data? When should I push it into my data mart? When should it come out of my data mart because the historic data is too old, right? There's really a lot of things you have to think about with just all the different variety of data you have. And then velocity. This is another really big piece that I think a lot of customers really get lost in. With velocity, you can be getting data all the time, right? 1 second intervals or even faster. And then it comes down to, how do you want to handle it at the end of the day, right? Do I need a real-time dashboard, or am I just going to collect a bunch of data and then do kind of batch jobs on it, or micro batch jobs? You really have to look at, what is the value to my business, and when do I need those business updates and insights? Back in the old days when the cloud was first starting, you would see companies would just run it overnight, right? And then as things became more and more complex and they had more and more data, they had to define, okay, overnight, I've got too much data, I can't run it overnight. So now they started doing, mini batch jobs during the day and things like that. So it really comes down to understanding as a business and defining, what's the velocity coming in? What do I really need it to have, right? How often does my dashboard need to be updated? Because for most things, you don't have to get to real time. Some companies do want real time, but it's really, really expensive to go to real time if you don't need it. So it's really important to look at that velocity. And then there's veracity, right? This is kind of one of the new ones in here, but that's really, how good is the data, right? How much can I trust this data? Is that API coming in, or my sensors, is that data that's coming in, is it accurate? Does it tell a good story? Do I need to clean it up? There's all kinds of questions just around what's going on with that data, how clean is it, and what extra work needs to be done. And then you have value. This is a really big one. As we get more and more sensors out there, as more and more things are coming in, people are pulling tons of data off of, people using a cell phone app and all that. And it becomes, I've got all this data, I've got a huge, terabytes and maybe even petabytes of data out there, and it's sitting on S3, and I'm getting, $100,000 bill a month for S3. Do you need all that data? Is there value in that data? I know people have talked about, oh, don't ever throw away data, but that's actually not true, right? You want to look at it, you want to understand, what am I truly doing? What's my business doing? What's all this data coming in? Is there really value to some of it? Some of it might have historic value, you push that to Glacier. Others, there's really not a point to keep some of it. I know people keep saying keep all your data, but at the end of the day, we're getting so much data now, you can't even process it all. And so you really need to look at the value. And then just the variability, right? This is all the different ways that the data comes in. If you have 12 different data sources coming in, you've got a bunch of schemas you're looking at, you've got all kinds of different things that are there that you now have to do ETL on. So that becomes really difficult, and that's where you start looking at, do I want to write Spark jobs, or am I going to start looking at all these tools that are out there, your Upsolvers, your Fivetrans, your Amorphic, that can help me really clean up this data, simplify it before it hits my data lake and kind of that buy situation. Or, people do build it out with Spark and customize exactly what they want. So there's really, just trying to understand that variability piece is super important.
Yeah, this is really great, Ryan. This resonates with me personally. As you know, I'm doing some kind of personal data analytics and machine learning myself in some projects. And all of these things are things you have to think about when you're going through the process. And I'm especially concerned about the veracity question, right? You really want that data to be trustworthy because it can really diminish your capability to have it permeate your organization and be something that you can trust and utilize to really drive success of the business. Unless the data can be trusted, you can't do that. And the variability question is huge for me as well, because getting data formatted in the right way and cleaned up can be a big challenge. And that kind of leads me into a question for you, which is when you're looking at all of these pieces, there's quite a lot to consider. And I know that customers come to us and they say, hey, my exec team really wants me to get started quickly. I need to see results as quickly as I can to prove that this is something that I need to really invest in for the future. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of really smart people and a lot of people that understand how to talk with the C-suite and the executives. And, a lot of those data projects we talked about, often wouldn't necessarily have that executive buy-in. They would often, come and we would explain the iceberg analogy here. And I know icebergs are used in a lot of different fields, but, at the end of the day, a C-suite guy really just cares about that data visualization, right? He wants to know, where's my dashboard? You've been here a week. Why don't I have some new cool dashboard? And that was really, a sticky point that we've seen in a lot of projects, right? They don't understand the time scale. They don't understand the amount of work that's involved to make that little dashboard. In order to get there, you have to do data ingestion, right? You have to get that data into your data lake. You have to set up S3, right? You have to set up a data governance strategy. You need to set up security permissions and VPCs, and how am I going to handle any GDPR or PII data? Do I need to do tokenization? Who has access to the different levels of the data? And then you look at, okay, I want to build a dashboard. What service am I going to use? Am I going to use QuickSight or Tableau? How complicated is my dashboard going to be? Am I going to need to set up a data mart? A lot of these dashboarding services out there, your Tableaus and QuickSights, have tried to allow you to do more and more ETL inside their dashboards, but at the same time, they're still not the same as if you have, if you're just pulling that data from SQL from a data mart. You can get bogged down very quickly in Tableau or QuickSight by trying to run too complicated of an ETL job there. And then people are like, I hate this tool, I load a dashboard, it takes forever. Once people get to that dashboard stage, they're really looking for, let me see the data quickly, make the jobs run fast. And so, you're going to have to be setting up data marts, right? You're going to be setting up a Redshift, and you're going to set up ETL to transform that data into Redshift, and then, set up whatever tables there are. And then QuickSight and those tools are just going to be easily grabbing that data, through just SQL queries and plotting it. And then the same goes, some of these tools now will show your output from an ML algorithm, right? And if you're looking at, a machine learning algorithm, most of these projects end up, the first 2 weeks you're doing data analysis, you're looking at the data, you're understanding the data, and then you spend the next several weeks, 4, 5, 6 weeks building the model, training the model, validating the model. So there's a lot of time that it takes to just get everything prepared for that final data visualization piece. So we really, push this with our customers that, look, we all know that the end is this visualization, right? These cool graphs or these cool reports, but, think of the iceberg. We got to get through all these stages, and it's really, managing upwards and working with that, with the C-suite, so that they understand all the pieces involved before you get to that visualization step.
Got it. Yeah, that's really, really helpful, and really resonates as well that customers at the end of the day, they're looking for the results, right? They want that tip of the iceberg, but there's a lot underneath that needs to be explored. And we should talk about kind of how to translate these tenets, these core tenets, into an actual concept of architecture and solutions, the concept of a data lake and kind of what that looks like in practice. Maybe give us an overview there as well.
Right. So, a data lake, as we walk through, kind of had those steps in the iceberg diagram. In practicality, here's kind of the diagram I like to use when I talk to customers. It shows all of those pieces and how they're interrelated. Organizations are really looking at, do I build, do I buy? And then they're also just seeing all these companies that are out there, right? There's just tons of companies that just keep fragmenting the space. Do I choose a hyperscaler, right? Do I stay on-prem? Do I choose, what data mart do I choose, right? There's so many questions. It's really important to do your research or work with a partner that understands this ecosystem so they can walk you through all of the different pieces that we have here so you can really understand the ramifications of each step, right? You're going to sit there. We always like to work backwards, right? That's one of the big pushes that AWS has, and it's something I really believe in as well, is understanding what's your final goal, what's your outcome, what are you trying to do, right? Is it I'm building some application and I want to make sure it's, the data is getting, both saved and put into whatever my application is. Am I enabling users, whether those are data scientists or whether they're BI guys? And then am I doing dashboarding or am I doing machine learning? Like, what am I really doing? What's our goal here? And so that's really going to define and drive a lot of what you're doing. So once you know what exactly is my end goal, you can start looking at, okay, in order to do this end goal, what are my data sources going to be, right? Is it going to be some IoT? And that's, on the far left of this diagram is the data sources. Am I going to be doing IoT? Am I going to be pulling it from some API like Salesforce or anything of that nature? Am I going to be pulling it from some on-prem database, right? Am I going to be pulling it out with the various tools we have, DMS and things like that? Or is it just going to be straight files, right? There's still a lot of companies, that are just working in CSV files. It's amazing. You'll see Fortune 100 companies that are managing their entire company simply through Excel. It's fascinating, but it still works, right? That's what people know. And so, you still have those files you have to look at. So then it becomes, what are all my connectors? How am I doing those data ingestion jobs? Can I use tools like Glue or using Fivetran or Upsolver? All these great pieces that are out there that get that data into your data lake. And then once you have that data lake, there's all kinds of pieces around that. You have, what are my bucket strategies, right? Am I gonna, you always want to have a raw zone. Then how many transform zones am I gonna have? And then with my raw data, what's my strategy gonna be with that? Am I gonna move it into Glacier after a certain period of time? Am I gonna take snapshots of my databases? How am I really going to archive and govern all that data? And it also becomes, you may not just only put your raw zone into Glacier. Maybe you're going to take some of your transform data because it was really hard to process and make that transform zone. And so there's really a lot of things you have to do with that strategy. And then you look at, okay, what are all my user rules? How am I going to set up all of that? How am I going to set up permissions? How am I going to deal with tokenization? And then there's a whole monitoring and logging piece, right? Using CloudWatch or CloudTrail, or a lot of people are using Datadog just to understand, how's my data flowing in? What's it looking like? How about my data flowing out, right? Is everything working properly? Am I having issues? And then you've got to add on to that some data quality as well, right? Where you're looking at, is the incoming stream I'm getting, is that data accurate? If I'm running a lot of my own IoT devices, maybe I'm seeing failures in my IoT devices, and I'm going to be catching them at my data lake where it's saying, hey, look, you're having issues where the data from these sources is bad, right? So you have to be continually doing that quality assurance to make sure that you're getting the best quality data, and that'll inform about your system as well. Then you look at ETL, right? How do I move my data into data marts or into visualization tools or into SageMaker, right? You look at, am I pushing or pulling data? Maybe I'm going to use a Lambda function or a state machine, or there's a lot of cool new tools and Glue and Data Brew and all that to get your data into SageMaker. I think it's, you just look at it, there's so many tools out there. How do you decide which one? And that's really where a company like Mission can come in and work with you and help you understand the whole architecture and what works best for your business. You know, we were talking some about build versus buy. You know, some companies, you know, when they're smaller, may not want to invest in a data team to work through all of these steps. So having, you know, a company that could come in, build out the infrastructure, and then either turn the keys over to you or help maintain it is really going to be something that helps them. And that's really where our data lake as a service offering comes in, right? Where you can bring in a team from Mission that just helps you throughout this whole journey in any way possible, working alongside you in a sprint-based manner. And they'll, you know, do all these different pieces, right? Ingestion, set up S3, set up the data governance, the ETL, and then a lot of the big decisions become in the data warehouse, data mart piece, right? Everyone's seen Snowflake, everyone's seen the huge investments in Databricks, and it comes down to, you know, do those outperform Redshift? You know, there's a lot of cost savings that you can see in Redshift over Snowflake and Databricks, and so having, you know, a company that's just there that can tell you all the pros and cons and what situations those work best for, you know, we're here to help advise you, and then we can help set those up for you to continue your journey. So it really comes down to, when you're looking at this, you know, what's your timing, how complicated your system, and, you know, once you define that, then you can look at build versus buy. You know, there's, you know, like we talked about these tools, you know, Upsolver, Amorphic, they're really great because they'll let you get to the business pieces first, but of course there's a cost, right? If you're going to build a data lake, then you're going to basically pay all the costs up front, and it's going to be yours. You're going to own it. You're going to manage it. You're only going to have your AWS infrastructure costs. And then when you go to this buy decision, you have to decide, okay, I'm buying infrastructure essentially, right? So I'm buying what these guys spent all their time building the infrastructure, but now I'm just simply going straight to my use cases. And now I'm going to pay my AWS fees plus an additional fee on top of that for whatever infrastructure I choose, right? Whether it's, you know, Amorphic, Upsolver, Snowflake, Databricks, you know, Tableau, all those companies, you're just paying for that UI that they've built. And so it really comes down to, is that what you want to do? And depending upon your team and where their skills are, you know, it could be very well the best place for you to go because you're getting your product to market faster that way.
Yeah, super useful, and you know, that definitely there are cases that we've advised customers to kind of go either way, right? And I think that's because it's a complex decision. You really have to navigate it and align it with your kind of business goals. And just a quick note for the group here, I have started to see some questions roll in, and please keep them coming. I'm going to address one real quick before I throw a question back to Ryan. And David asked, can we share some information about our better known customers? And the answer is absolutely. If you actually go to missioncloud.com, there is a link up there called case studies. And we work really hard with our customers to make sure we have publicly referenceable case studies on there. We've got some excellent ones from some businesses like Contract Safe, VBO Tickets, the Boston Celtics, Impulse, Dream Warrior Group, Blue Goji. So lots and lots of great case studies up there, and I'd encourage you to take a look there as well. So keep the questions coming. Thank you for the ones that you sent across so far. I think, you know, this has been all about kind of understanding how to form that data lake, right, and get it into place, whether it's build or buy or however you want to get there. Once you're there, you want to start actually doing some, you know, something with that data, right? Some advanced analytics, some machine learning. How are people doing that? And what are kind of the biggest challenges there, Ryan?
Oh, shoot. Yeah, so, you know, machine learning and AI, or, you know, whatever buzzwords you've heard, you know, those are really been fascinating over the last couple of years. You've seen all the cloud providers coming out with a ton of AI services, right? You know, this here's a graphic from AWS, and you can see on the top, right, there's a huge number of different services that are custom built. And, you know, they may work for your use case, they may not. You know, obviously it comes down to what they've been trained on, and if your particular use case fits, those AI services can be great because you can get a jump start on what you're working on versus building your own algorithm. But often, you know, we'll see customers that need to build out their own, you know, their own predictive model, or, you know, it just depends on what they're trying to do. And then we're able to use SageMaker or any other IDE that's out there. There's tons of great tools. I think some of the real issues that I've seen are that boards will come in and say, you guys got to get into machine learning, right? I don't know how many customers I've walked into a meeting that have said, our board tells us we have to do machine learning. Tell us what we need to do, right? They don't even have a place they necessarily want to start. They just say, I've got to do this. Or another big one that's out there is, okay, you've worked with other companies in our vertical. Tell us what they're doing so that we can do the same thing. I think what you really have to do is you have to understand your business. You need to go through and figure out, what are my biggest pain points as a business and how can those be solved? And sometimes those are going to be solved by using a machine learning algorithm. Sometimes it might be able to be an AI service, and sometimes it's just really a dashboard. It's really about being able to sit down with your team and understand, what are my pain points and what's going to move the needle the most for a business, right? If you're a sales organization, maybe it's forecasting, right? If you're an organization that's got call centers, then there's a lot of great things you can do where you can transcribe those calls, and then you can look at the data and really understand, what's going on, what kind of sentiment am I seeing from the people calling me, what are things of interest. So it's really sitting there and understanding, what goals do I have, what am I trying to solve, and how can I solve them, and do I have the data to solve them? Because there's been a time or two where we've talked to a customer and they're like, we want to figure out when this particular instance happens. And it's like, okay, great, that's a great problem. And then we went and dug in, and they weren't collecting any of that data that would allow them to solve that problem. That happens all the time. Great problems are there, and then you have to look at it. Do I have the data to support that model? And if not, can I change my system? Can I bring in some sensor suite? What do I need to do to gather that data if I feel that's where my business value is, right? So really understanding your business is a key when you're trying to look at doing AIML, because if you just throw out, I need to do AIML, people are going to come, give you a ton of models, they'll lead you in any direction that their company's doing. And then at the end of the day, that's just going to be a model you never put into production because it doesn't have actual value. And, I think right now, when you look at the literature, there's a lot of things out there that are just leading people in the wrong direction. We in the data science world talk a lot about garbage in, garbage out, right? Most of the time when I'm working on a data science problem is spent looking at the data, analyzing the data, cleaning up the data, understanding the outliers of the data. And then when you look at the literature and you look at what people are doing, they're not trying to push that anymore, right? They're pushing, throw it into a deep learning algorithm and it'll spit out an answer. And that's absolutely true. But the problem with deep learning is you don't understand any of the intermediate steps, right? They're comprehensible only to the computer or only to the model, to the neural nets that it ran. You can look at those intermediate outputs and they make zero sense. You can't understand why your algorithm failed. And so it really becomes, making sure you're looking at your data and you're understanding what's going on. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of effort and get nothing at the end of the day. I think that the other thing is AutoML, right? People are saying, and that suffers the same issues. If you don't really clean up your data, you don't understand what you're putting in, AutoML is going to find an answer. It's going to give you some result. And, is that a good result? The answer is maybe, but often it's not. I've seen people throw in tons of data into AutoML or tons of data into a deep learning algorithm, and it comes out, you get an answer, you get an algorithm, it's got, an R squared that might be 85%. And so people are like, look, I did this great model, but then you look at it and you're tracking it and it does terrible, right? Maybe it was a recommendation engine that you created and it's going to recommend other products. And then you put that into production and all those products it recommends, nobody ever chooses. And that's, one of the downfalls that you can see when you just have people randomly using these algorithms, that you're just going to get garbage on the output side. So it's really important that you build a smart data science strategy and that you're truly looking at the problem and not just having people throwing data at models or throwing data at AutoML, because you're just going to get really bad outputs, and that's going to leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And I think getting solution oriented is kind of the key thing, right? Yeah, one of the big pitfalls from a technologist perspective is cool technology, and everyone says, "Hey, we have to be using this technology," and that's great. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a real goal for it, right, it's not going to really be useful for you. You have to think about what are my business goals, what am I trying to accomplish here, and then work backwards. And one of, I guess, the follow-ups, you mentioned something like recommendation engines. What are some kind of other successful kind of focus areas and use cases that you hear from customers?
Yeah, I think it's really, I've helped with so many problems over the last several years. It's really pretty cool. I've seen companies, we helped enable a really big train company where they, in the winter time. So I don't know how many people know about trains, but everything's reverse positive brakes, right? So you've got a particular pressure in your brake lines, and when that pressure gets too low, the brakes slam on, right? So that's how train brakes work. And so when you're shipping stuff across the Rockies in the wintertime, that cold air and other factors can decrease that pressure. And so we were working with a company to figure out how many train cars can they successfully move from station to station, right? This is a big deal, so that they can optimize, that system and not be stopping in the middle and be like, okay, I got to take off train cars. And so, it was really fun, really cool project. Um, we've seen a ton of companies that are really, trying to get more and more out of their call centers, right? So they're looking at transcribing their data and then running, comprehend and getting sentiment and getting, keywords. We were working with this company that takes a lot of the messages that various hotels get, and we're working with it to try to understand, build dashboards that would help them understand their customers, right? Are there properties that are having issues? Are there, what's going on at each of the different hotels? What kind of things are they seeing? Are there problems that they can quickly see a problem from the voicemails and then try to rectify it, right? It might be something customer service wise, maybe it's too slow for check-in, or, some of the things might have been, the pool was in bad shape. So there's lots of cool things you can pull out of the call centers just by running, transcribe and comprehend. Um, we did this really cool project for a gas pipeline company, right? Much like the stock market, gas pipelines work on an arbitrage pattern as well. You have a particular pressure in a gas pipeline, and there's contracts that are out there. So you've sold a certain percentage of your pressure, and then you have that additional pressure that you can sell to anybody. So, I bring it up because, in this instance where Texas had all these issues and they're talking about the 10,000% increase in the price of gas, that's why this happens, right? Is these pipelines were set up for this arbitrage where any excess gas they have over these contracts, they can essentially sell at whatever price they can get. It almost becomes like an auction. So they're always trying to figure out, how do I get as much pressure in this pipeline, especially during the wintertime, that when people don't put in the right contracts, saying, because there's an auction that happens every night where all the power plants say, I want to buy this much, gas to run my turbine. And if they're wrong by the amount of energy they need for their customers, they have to go buy it on the spot market. And so that spot, if you're a gas pipeline operator and you can keep your pressure as high as possible, then you have as much as you need in that spot market to make, a 10,000% killing when people are in trouble. So, that's
That's
how the system was set up.
It's pretty fascinating. There's lots of different use cases. And I think the cool thing about, hearing you walk through that is you can really think about it as, what am I trying to accomplish for what category of person, right? So for my end customers, maybe I'm wanting to do recommendations and personalization. Internally, maybe I'm trying to optimize my business, right? Figuring out how to be more efficient and effective by analyzing the data that I have, surfacing insights for the business and improving. And there's really this entire spectrum. So I like starting from the questions, right? What questions am I trying to answer? What value am I trying to provide, and to whom? And then you can go in and say, okay, what's my data? Do I have the data to support this? How do I clean it and get it to the right spot? So this is super helpful. I think that's definitely pretty insightful. One of the big kind of challenges as well is you do need to have a team of experts really to make this work. And sometimes there's a void there, right? I know for us, it is extremely challenging to hire really great data science and data engineers. And maybe talk to us a little bit about how companies approach that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, a lot. I want to be careful how I say this. So there's basically out there, you kind of have three camps of data scientists in essence, right? You have true data scientists who have basically been doing this for a long time or have gone to college now. There's a lot of new companies there's a lot of new colleges that have created degrees or master's programs now that go into data science. And, so you've got kind of this upper echelon of data scientists that really understand how you should look at the data, how you should try to understand the data, how you should approach the problems. Then you kind of have the second set of people that, may have gone to your boot camps or may have gone to internal training courses. And, they're kind of what I call data enthusiasts, right? They might have started out as data engineers or app dev guys. So they got a pretty good idea on the background on how to run the algorithms, how to troubleshoot the algorithms, but they just don't have the same rigor to understanding the data, right? Validating the data, making sure I'm putting in good data, really doing that data analyst piece, which is really the most important step, right? I mean, anybody can go to Stack Overflow, run an algorithm or debug an algorithm and get an answer. It's really about, is it a good answer at the end of the day? And then you have a lot of people that, have just basically, citizen data guys who have gone to Stack Overflow and just run stuff and spit it out all over the place, right? Wherever it comes from. And often that's, kind of, they just don't have the training. They're just trying to do something quick. It might be an extra piece that they're trying to tackle in their job. And, often those are the algorithms, yeah, it ran, yeah, it completed, but it just isn't giving you value and can give you negative value, right? There's a lot of different biases that we talk about, right? Whether there's ethical biases, but when you really talk about a bias in a model, it's really important that you understand what the bias is. I've seen many times where, your data you might have a straight line in your data, right? And you did a really bad job fitting it. And instead of fitting that straight line, it's slightly off. So on the bottom side, basically cancels out the top side errors. And so you look like you have a really good fit, right? Like I've got a 90% fit, but I have a huge bias in my model because it doesn't line up. And so there's a lot of pieces that people just don't look at when they're validating or understanding if they haven't gone through all that rigor that upper echelon of data scientists have that really gets you to that great solution at the end of the day. So, I think, there's obviously, as that you have a limited supply, people are looking at, oh, look, I can get this guy from a boot camp, or this guy says he ran a model once. And, it's just not going to get you where you want to be, right? You really need to look at it and look at, if I can't hire somebody internally because maybe I don't need them full time, can I hire a partner that's going to come in, has the expertise, has the knowledge that I need to really build me a top-notch algorithm that I'm really going to be able to use. And then we get into the whole ML ops piece of keeping that model in production, maintaining that model while it's there, and doing all the automated training and all those pieces that you need to make sure your model stays up to date. So it's really, I know that a lot of companies, especially when they're small, just see it as, I need that data scientist on staff. I need to have this person. And, sometimes, you get what you pay for, and that's not the right choice to make. And it can be really more damaging to your business than if you would have gone out and, brought in a partner that really knows the best way to do it.
Yeah, you got to check the credentials and make sure that they didn't go to Stack Overflow State University um, for their formal training in machine learning. And I think there's a reason we call it data science, right? It is a science, and that means you need to approach it with that kind of rigor. And I really like the way you described that. And that does mean you need a particular type of person that is very difficult to hire, and that should really factor into everyone who's in attendance here. Your build versus buy decision, and sort of like, can I do this on my own, or do I need a partner? How much do I need, and how can I help? And that's definitely where Mission is happy to step in and listen to what your goals are and help enable you along kind of that entire spectrum, right? So given that, I think it would be really valuable for us to go kind of into the next section here, Ryan, where we rock into Q&A, I believe, if that's if I'm not mistaken. And before we go into the Q&A, so first of all, thank you, audience, for being here and for already sharing some really useful questions. Start hammering us with questions, and while you do that, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through a couple things on this slide. So as I mentioned, we do have an offer for you. So we can actually do a data analytics and machine learning assessment for you, and help you kind of establish a data analytics objectives for 2020 and beyond, developing your strategy and helping you build out a roadmap. And if you actually, I believe we've restored the handouts, and there is a with offer kind of handout there now, and you can download that as well, which would be super helpful. And with that, let's dive into some questions. So the first question that I see here is, what types of businesses can benefit from machine learning, and kind of how?
You know, it's really, you know, most businesses can probably benefit from machine learning. It really comes down to what's the best version for them, right? You know, any business might benefit from having, you know, a virtual assistant in some sense, or a chatbot, right? Say you're just simply there and you're, you know, we've enabled chatbots on things that were as simple as, you know, some clothing stores that had gift cards, and one of the biggest things people called about was to get the balance of their gift card, right? So we built out a chatbot where their users could come in, check their orders, check their balance on their cards and all that, right? So it's really helpful to that business because they were able to then have fewer customer support people and really push more people into a chatbot. It could be somebody is trying to understand, you know, what is my customer base, right? How do I define what my next product should be? Say you're a clothing company, I'm going back to clothing for whatever reason, clothing company, and I want to look at what's been hot, right? Like, okay, I see that for my particular company, people love my tees, and, you know, women love my t-shirts that are this particular kind of design. And so it's like, okay, well, I should push on those t-shirts. And then you look at what marketing channels did they come to our website from and buy this. And so it might be Instagram, right? So you then know, okay, let me market this shirt on Instagram, and I'm going to know that for the most part, I'm selling 1,000 units of that. So let me make sure I have at least 1,000 units so that I can fulfill all these orders, right? So, you know, you can use all that insight to really help drive forward, you know, your business and what you're doing. You know, like we talked about transportation use cases, supply chain's really interesting, right? Say you're going to build out, you're going to take and build a smart factory, you're going to have pumps, you're going to have all these other machines, you're going to be able to take your historic data, build out models for when I'm going to have to do maintenance, and then you're going to predict when that maintenance needs to happen. That's going to then basically trigger whatever your ERP system is to then place an order in advance, so you have the parts on the shelf and you're not just stockpiling parts forever, right? So you can then just have this whole smart warehouse flow that's going on. You know, there's so many use cases. You know, one of the great things that we can help is just ideation sessions and help you understand which use cases can really work for your business.
Great, very, very useful. Before we get to the next question, I want to also call out here that on the right side of this slide, you'll see some ways that you can get in touch with us, including a phone number, an email address, and our website. So definitely feel free to reach out. And let's talk about the kind of next question here. It says, you mentioned ML ops. How are the lines drawn between my data experts and ops work?
Yeah, so that's really, you know, been a pretty interesting space over the last year. You know, I've seen some data scientists that only want to build a model, right? They only want to train a model, they only want to test a model, they only want to validate that model. And then, you know, once they're done with that, they want to hand it off to a data engineer, right, who's then going to refactor it to work. And then there's other data scientists that really want to see it all the way through the process, and they're willing to help refactor that code into Python or wherever else. Or if they're in SageMaker, you know, really help make the endpoint and test the endpoint. So it really comes down to who you've hired and what their interests are, right? You know, I would always try to understand their interests so that, you know, if they're excited, if it's a data scientist and they're excited to help put it into production, let them, because that's going to be that big collaboration piece that we talked about that can often be missing, right? Where you know, that data scientist wants to collaborate with the data engineer and get it into production, that's going to be success. That data scientist that only wants to build the model and hand it off, most of those projects are going to fail, right? You're not going to have the buy-in from the data engineer that is, you know, he may have limited access to that data scientist and it's just going to fail, or they might be arguing about the best models, or they may not just have the communication between each other, right? One of the big ML ops pieces and having set up the environment is keeping track of all your packages in your model as well, because it may end up, you know, data scientists use these packages, data engineer gets it, he doesn't quite find the same packages on his machine. Now they're different packages, and now the output's different, right? My model that worked great with XGBoost 13, but this guy over here put it into XGBoost 12, and now they no longer, it doesn't work the same because, you know, these algorithms, as they improve, you know, there are slight differences, or they may not use the same data set, right? One of the big ML ops pieces is keeping track of what data sets were used to train the model to get that output, right? So, you know, the data engineer may be using an entirely different data set. And it's pretty crazy when you look at it, because sometimes, even if you shift that data set by, you know, maybe it's a couple of days or a week, you could have entirely different outcomes from your model. So if he's trying to validate your result versus his result, they could be off, you know, their factors and all, you know, the parameters could be off. And then there's a lot of trying to understand what exactly is going on here. So having that ML ops piece that keeps track of your libraries, keeps track of your data sets, is really key in getting these into production smoothly.
Absolutely. Okay, so Ryan, we have time for one more question, and this one is a good one. I really like it. So it's asking historical data versus real-time analysis, right? And it says that, do you see historical data and real-time analysis as two separate solutions or two parts of the same larger solution? And you know, this resonates with me because I want to be able to do real-time analysis so I can actually have a triggered response, right? So maybe give us a little insight on that.
Well, I mean, historical data is usually what you use to build that algorithm that you're trying to predict something in the future or in real time, right? And so that's where we start talking about model lifetimes and understanding your data. You know, I think often people get the misconception that I build a model once, I train it once, it lasts forever, right? But models are not that way. They're not immortal. You know, models have a particular lifetime, and you need to understand what that lifetime is so that you can constantly be updating that. And that's the other really big reason for ML ops, you know, that constant training, auto training and all that. And, you know, your historic data, then you have to understand, you know, how far back should I go to train my model, right? If you were in real estate and you trained your model 2 years ago, it would tell you one thing versus your model now, right? So that model just wouldn't work. So it's really important when you're doing real time and in any model that's got prediction that you understand the lifetime and that you've trained your model with the historic data that's going to give you the best representation of where you are today. And sometimes that's seasonal models, right? So you might have a model where you go back only to a year ago quarter, right? So maybe Q1 2020 is how you want to train it for your Q1 2021 model. So you just really need to look at and understand the data, and you know, that's that big piece that the data scientists really focus on, is understanding that data.
Great, thank you for that, Ryan. Great insight. All right. Well, with that, I think we're reaching the end of our time. This has been a real pleasure. So thank you all for attending. Reminder: there are those handouts that you can actually now download that work. Definitely get in touch with us to take advantage of this assessment. There's the number, our website, and info@missioncloud.com for email that you see on the screen. And we look forward to hearing from you and hearing a little bit more about your own data analytics and machine learning journey. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.